Oregon's a big favorite against Arizona State in Tempe. 23.5 points to be exact, according to FanDuel. So can the Sun Devils hang around? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for a crossover edition of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Sun Devils. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. That's Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with either Arizona State or Oregon, wherever you may be listening to or watching this show. If you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please, and thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. My man, Richie Bradshaw, Locked On Sun Devils. Let's hop right into it. Can Arizona State hang around in this game against Oregon?
Spencer, I just got one thing to say.
What's that?
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no, and it ain't over now.
Oh, my goodness. I think Oregon fans are going to like that. The Animal House reference, of course, a well-known video in Oregon lore, but let's get super serious now, Richie. Well, only as serious as you and I can ever possibly get, which is to say super not very. Serial. Yeah, we get minorly serial from time to time. It's a big line for Oregon to be favored on the road in Tempe. I think there's a reason. You got quarterback issues with Arizona State swirling around. Arizona State's defense is good. What's your sense on whether or not they can keep up with the high-flying Ducks?
Here's the thing, man, is like this is a Sun Devils team that has had no business being in quite a few games this year, but they gave USC a run for their money. They were going to beat Washington if not for a pick six. They held Michael Penix out of the end zone, just like we all predicted in Seattle. Like, this is a team.
I had that on my bingo card. I don't know about you.
So did I. I also had ASU winning in Pasadena last week on my bingo card. This is a Sun Devils team that is so scrappy, and they look at their opponents, and they don't look at rankings. They don't look at records. They don't look at NFL talent. They just say, we're going to go into this game and we're going to go blow for blow. So when I look at this game, I can see a scenario, right, where maybe everything comes together and ASU finds a way to make this close, or ASU is just like makes it like a quote unquote trap game here. But at the end of the day, there's no reason for this to be a close game. I look at that Washington game, right, and you caught lightning in a bottle. Everything went right for you. But you play that game 100 times. I don't know if you're doing that more than 5 times. Like, more often than not, Washington is running you off the field, especially in Seattle. With Oregon, it's the same caliber kind of team. There's a lot of NFL talent. They've got a Heisman contender at quarterback. They've got a legitimate receiver who's going to be contending for the Fred Biletnikoff this year. They've got a great running back contending for Doak Walker. They got one of the best offensive lines in the nation. They got a stingy defense that can be really good. So when I look at this on paper, it feels like everything should be stacked against Arizona State. It's just one of those things, though, where it's like, I guess it could be any given Saturday. If you're asking me to be professional, this shouldn't be a close game.
It shouldn't, no. But here's the one thing with Oregon, and I talked about this a bit on yesterday's episode of Locked On Ducks. Oregon, when they play the way they're capable of, there are not a lot of teams in college football that can keep up with them. There are probably less than 10. It's probably somewhere in like the 7 to 8 range. And Arizona State is not one of them. But Oregon has had moments this year where they have not played at their best, because guess what? It's really hard to play perfect football every single week all the time. But that USC game, for instance, Oregon led for double digits most of the game. They were in control, and then you look up and you go, wow, it was a 9-point game, and if USC kicks an extra point, it's a 1-possession game before you kick an onside kick, and suddenly things are a little bit more tense, and penalties and field goals are the reasons that's the case. So I think if Oregon doesn't play the way that they're capable of, if they don't come out ready, one thing we know, and you know very well about this Arizona State team, Richie, with our old friend Kenny Dillingham, is they are reflective of how he speaks to the media at the podium every time I see him talk. And that is, they're fighting, they're scrapping, they're clawing, they'll lay an occasional dud, right? The Utah game is a dud, but like you said, they had no business being on the field competitive with USC. They had negative business being on the field competitive in a position where they should have won against Washington, but they play really, really hard. And I think that's, combined with a defense that's had some really, really good moments this year, is why Oregon does have to be, on guard at some level to play their game. But if the Ducks do that, I don't think the Sun Devils can keep up.
I have seen some fans that for Oregon that are saying you should rest starters. And I promise
whoa.
Seriously. Just fans. I hopped on another podcast yesterday to talk about ASU and Sun Devils, and they did a live, and some people were saying we should rest guys. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, first of all, you don't ever rest guys.
No,
that's how you lose football games.
Yep.
Second of all, the one thing you shouldn't do is underestimate an opponent on the road. That is the one thing you should not do. So, and especially with the way Arizona State has been scrappy this year, they play up to their competition. It's been phenomenal to see. You look at what they did last year. This is a team that was dead in the water for most of the year. They are, I love what you said. They're playing to the energy and to the word of what Kenny Dillingham says. They are doing, as Kenny Dillingham has basically trademarked at this point, you do your 111th. You do your job on your side of the field, and you do that, and everybody else does it, and you're going to find a lot of success. And the Sun Devils are, in spite of a record that is 3-7, are finding a lot of success this year. This game is no different. Like, you need to go into it with the mindset of do your 111th, do what you're supposed to do, and who knows what happens. Maybe this is a 10-point game. Maybe this is a 3-point game. Maybe it is a 20-point loss, whatever. Maybe you somehow get a crazy win, right? Whatever it is, these guys are going to find a way to do their 111th and potentially make this a heck of a game. On paper, it shouldn't be, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you play the game on the field for a reason, but I think that where I struggle seeing Arizona State hanging around, and we'll get to our predictions to wrap up today's episode of the show, both of us will, where I really like Oregon is in the trenches in this particular matchup. Arizona State, once upon a time this season, didn't have enough offensive linemen to line up and kick a field goal because they didn't feel like they were going to be able to put guys out there who could block for just a couple of seconds. And there have been injuries, and I think they're still trying to, find some higher level talent up front as they go forward. I think their defensive line is good. I don't know. I mean, BJ Green's a beast. He is one of the most underrated defensive linemen in the entire conference.
Top four in the nation in pressures.
Yeah, and up there with two other Pac-12 guys, by the way, Braylon Trice and Laiatu Latu. Conference has got a lot of big-time players, not just at the quarterback position. And BJ Green is good. I don't know if I see the depth outside of BJ Green that gives me concern as an Oregon fan, because I look at this offensive line, and guess what? They're up for the Joe Moore Award this year for the best offensive line in the country. They've had a lot of turnover this year, but Jackson Powers Johnson is maybe the best center in the country. I think their guards have played very well. Josh Connerly, his pass blocking has been hit or miss at left tackle, but his run blocking, he is a bulldozer in the run game. Really good. And a Johnny Cornelius, the Rhode Island transfer, has been great. So I feel good about the Ducks up front, but there are a lot of other matchups to watch in this particular game, including perhaps most importantly, what in the world is Arizona State going to be doing at the quarterback position? We will indeed talk about that after we talk about Prize Picks, because that's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers, right? Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks and Richie as well, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. You can have a ton of fun and do all sorts of fun props too. You can do LeBron James and Travis Kelce, 10.5 3-pointers and receptions, go over or under, depending on how you feel. You can do all sorts of fun stuff, play against other people like Meek Mill, for instance, the rapper, or Andrew Schultz, the comedian, in the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each and every week. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Go check out Prize Picks today. All right, Richie, let's talk about Arizona State's quarterback situation. You broke the news, it was either yesterday or the day before, that Jaden Rashada looked like he was going to play, but now he's not going to play. They brought in the Notre Dame transfer, Drew Pine. He hasn't been healthy. It's been a mess. I mean, Cameron Scattaboo and Jalen Conyers are probably on two deep somewhere for healthy quarterbacks in this game. For Oregon fans, that's a tight end and a running back, by the way. So who's Arizona State rolling out at quarterback against this really good Oregon defense?
It's more than likely going to be Trenton Bourguet, bearing something absolutely unforeseen. Bourguet has played the vast majority of the season. Look, he's a great individual. I have somewhat of a decent relationship with him. I've talked to him before. Nicest guy. There's no denying that he has struggled this year. Just one touchdown pass over like 6 or 7 games, 4 interceptions. And he's not airing the ball out well enough. Last year, he was doing a good enough job. I think he had like 13 touchdowns against 6 or 7 interceptions in about half a season. This year, despite like better weapons, like Elijah Badger's back, Jalen Conyers is back. They bring in like Xavier Guillory, who's out for the year, but he was still a big part of what they were doing. Troy O'Mare, they've got the talent, and he just hasn't been able to find the end zone through the air. I mean, Cameron Scattaboo has attempted 8 passes this year, and he also has 1 touchdown pass. Him and Bourguet have the same amount of touchdown passes. The difference, Scattaboo has 8 attempts, Bourguet has 211. This is a unit that has just really struggled to move the ball in spite of the weapons. But, I mean, they just haven't been able to get too many guys involved. You've got Elijah Badger, who leads the team in receptions and yards, 58 catches, 649 yards. Next closest, Jalen Conyers, 25 catches, 313 yards. So you can literally more than double second place to what Badger has been. And I don't know that that's a Conyers issue. I don't know if that's a Guillory or Stovall or an O'Mare issue. This feels a lot more like a quarterbacking issue that has been unable to get such a talented and deep amount of guys involved in the game. This is ultimately what has decided games. You could have beat Washington if not for a pick 6. That was the deciding score in that game. For all we know, that could be what ultimately wins or seals the deal against Oregon. To me, that is what's going to happen. Is if Bourguet is playing good, like, and I mean like 2-3 touchdown passes, you're going to be in this game. If he's throwing 2 or 3 interceptions, you're going to get blown out. I think the defense can step up. I know we've got some weapons, but ultimately this game, just like the Washington game, is going to come down to how Bourguet plays. And he's going up against a buzzsaw of an Oregon Ducks defense.
Yeah, and when you look at this Arizona State offense, they have got playmakers. Jalen Conyers at tight end would probably be the number 2 tight end for Oregon. I don't know if he would surpass Terrence Ferguson, but he's really, really good. And you look at Elijah Badger, that's a good receiver. And you look at Xavier Guillory and Malik Stovall, like, it's a capable, more than capable, I'd say, receiving core. I think it's probably middle of the conference or so. Cameron Scattaboo, the Sacramento State transfer, has been outstanding at running back, and he catches the ball out of the backfield. He can throw the ball as well. I won't be surprised one bit, Richie, if there are 2 to 3 trick plays in this game from Kenny Dillingham. I think he's going to
per drive, Spencer. Per drive, there'll be 2 to seriously, because what you're trying to do is like how at halftime your goal is to have Dan Lanning sit there and go, how do we make adjustments to a team that is so wildly unpredictable? That's your goal in this game.
Yeah. Okay. I think that we're in agreement there, because when you're outmatched the way Arizona State is in this particular spot, you got to try everything, right? You got to have something they're not ready for, have a little razzle dazzle and whatnot. And I think Oregon should fully expect to see that and has to be on guard for it. But the reason I feel good about the Ducks defense going into this game is their ability to get pressure on the quarterback. They sacked Caleb Williams 3 times. They had him under pressure and duress and having to run all over the place. Trent Bourguet is not that kind of guy. I think he is, you know, a slightly lesser version of Bryson Barnes at Utah. I think they're very comparable. They even wear the same number, as it turns out. But I don't think he's someone who can overcome Arizona State potentially getting beaten up front. And I think, you know, even more so than Oregon's offensive line against the Arizona State front seven, which, you know, guys like BJ Green, good players, and they're physical. I think they are a physical team up front. So too is Oregon. I'd be worried as an Arizona State fan, and I'm therefore confident as an Oregon fan in how the defensive line plays against this ASU front five to protect Trenton Bourguet.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of what happened against UCLA is you were going up against one of, if not the best defensive fronts in the entire Pac-12. Laiatu Latu, for my money, is the best defender in the entire nation. I mean, he's just a game wrecker.
I'll take him over anybody on the edge.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not like a shortage of talent in college football. He is just that good. But what ASU did was the most obscure thing I've ever seen in my life. And they did this like widespread is, I believe, what they coined it, where you had Lee Fontanu, the center, was snapping to Trenton Bourguet, but you had three offensive linemen on the far side of one of the sidelines, and then the other two on the other far side. But then you had the tight ends and the receivers lined up there. Sometimes you had a running back next to Bourguet. And essentially what you did is you took such a great pass rush and you forced them to spread out, because what are you going to do? Stack the line and rush five? He's in a shotgun, so it's not like he's going to immediately be sacked. That would be like they rush five, snap it, throw it. Guess what? I've got blockers over there. Did it work every time? Absolutely not, because you were going up against a good defense. But what you did was you took away UCLA's bread and butter and essentially spread them out. Laiatu Latu, he still had a good day, but he should have had an elite day. And it's not even his fault. It's a scheming thing. This is what you're going to have to do against Oregon. Maybe not the same thing. Maybe not doing that widespread again, because that feels like something that teams are going to catch up to quickly. I don't know if that's a week-to-week thing you can do, but I would imagine that Kenny Dillingham is going to come up with all sorts of different ways to find ways to exploit Oregon's defense, because I don't look at Oregon's defense like they have many weaknesses, which means you're going to have to get incredibly creative in this game.
Yeah, you are. And I think you're going to have to just at some point win some 1v1s. And Oregon dealt with injuries in the secondary against USC last week in a big way. Still held Caleb Williams to less than 300 yards passing, which I thought was a really good showing, because Caleb Williams is very talented. Yes, he is elite. He makes some just absolutely ridiculous plays. One individual matchup I wanted to ask you about, and I know that Oregon fans are probably curious with regards to, is Troy Franklin, because that guy is on track to set the Oregon single season receiving yards and receptions and touchdowns record. I think I don't know how far away he is in the receptions, but he needs like 89 yards in the next 2 games to set the record. So
get that in the first quarter.
He could
first catch.
Yeah, barring an injury, he will get there this season. I tell you, Troy Franklin, and you say who's matching up with him, and how do you think he fares?
It's Ro Torrence, and Ro Torrence is somebody who can actually match up from a physical standpoint too. He's a 6'3" corner who can flip his hips. He mirrors very well. He's active throughout the route. He started off the year very up and down. There were some good plays. There were some bad plays. There were holdings. There was illegal contact. But over the last month, maybe even month and a half, Torrence has become the player that he finished the 2022 season with. And that's as a number one guy who you can put up against a number one receiver and win, 60-40. The receiver wins 60%. Ro Torrence wins 40%. He's that kind of guy who can use his size and that kind of leverage to be able to play up to guys. And Troy Franklin is not a short dude. He's not a small dude, and he's fast. So for me, what you're going to need to do, I truly would do some kind of bracket coverage with a safety looming near him. However, I do feel somewhat confident that Torrence can go up against Franklin. Anybody else on the team? Look, I like D Ford. I like Jordan Clark. I like the guys we have. Nobody is going to be able to go against Troy Franklin. Ro Torrence gives you the best opportunity. And quite frankly, I do think it could be a 60-40. I really do think that Torrence can, at a minimum, make this a really interesting matchup, and perhaps one of the tougher, not toughest, one of the tougher matchups that Franklin has gone up against this year.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good battle for sure. I think the concern Arizona State could have if they focus all their attention on Troy Franklin is we have seen Tez Johnson have some
He's
big,
really good too.
Yes, he is very good. He's had double-digit receptions in a couple games this year. He's had a bunch of 100-yard efforts. Like, he's the clear number 2 target for Bo Nix. And then you have Terrence Ferguson at tight end as well, and a couple other good receivers in Gary Bryant and Trayshawn Holden. Richie and I are going to make our predictions in this game. But one more thing that I've got to ask him about. Richie, who do you think is going to make the Athletic Brewing Company game-changing play of the week? Because I'm leaning towards the Oregon defense here making a big play. You talked about the pick 6 against Washington. I don't know if I'll – you know what? I think Oregon is going to have a defensive touchdown in this football game. I know, and I think that's going to be the Athletic Brewing Company game-changing play of the week. They've changed the game when it comes to non-alcoholic beers by making brews that are great tasting and award-winning and beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They brew over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, Sours, and more. And they're fit for all time, so you can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity even more enjoyable, like watching a big game between Oregon and Arizona State, watching your kids' game, which could also be Oregon and Arizona State, depending on who you are listening to or watching this show. Tackling work, which is going to be what I'm doing, somewhat watching the game, or working out. I will not be doing that during the game. That I can assure you. So you can find
no hangovers.
That is exactly right. No hangovers ever, which is the whole point. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers, use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, Richie. So last thing I want to ask you about before we get to our predictions for the game is Oregon defensively has to be able to slow down Cameron Scadaboo, because that is the engine that makes the Arizona State offense go when it does actually go. This is a defensively led team. Brian Ward, the former DC at Washington State, is really good. I mean, he has been doing more with – I know they got housed by Utah, but the offense literally – put the defense on the field every 90 seconds in that game. Yeah. It wasn't a fair fight. So I look at this game and say, okay, Arizona State's defense is going to come out and play hard. I don't know if they can slow down Oregon entirely, but
I don't think so.
I also look at their offense and why I think the Ducks are in a good spot to win and potentially cover that 23.5 point spread is I don't know that Arizona State's defense can have a lot of success, especially if Cameron Scadaboo is slowed down. And we've seen this sort of story go, play out before for the Ducks this year, right? Sione Vaki was a big-time name going into Utah. He was completely and utterly shut down. USC ran the ball kind of well coming into – nope, they ran for less than 3 yards a carry. Everything is tough against this Oregon defense. How is Arizona State going to try to attack the Ducks?
Like I said, you just got to find creativity. This is not a game where you can go in with very standard – ideas. You can't go in pistol. You can't do standard shotgun. You can't do, single back, whatever. You need to go in with the most unorthodox play calling that you possibly can. It's what kept you in that game against USC earlier this year. It's what helped you beat UCLA. It's one of the reasons why you didn't beat Washington, is I felt that they figured out the gimmicky stuff, but it also was not as potent as what it could have been. And injuries played a large part of that. You mentioned earlier that it got to a point where we couldn't kick field goals because they got me and you out there trying to block guys. Like it's very difficult to do that kind of stuff when you're not healthy. But Arizona State is getting a handful of guys back. The offensive line looks okay, all things considered, but they need to come out in this game. They can't hold back punches. They need to throw the refrigerator at this Oregon defense. They got to be as obscure as possible. I mean, look at what's a Division III football team doing, and see if that's working, and then try it against Oregon. Like it's one of those games where it's like, why not? We have nothing to lose in this game and everything to gain if we can somehow beat Oregon.
You know what play I bet comes out at, I'm going to make two more predictions here. I think Oregon manages a defensive touchdown or special teams, but probably defense. I think Oregon gets that done. Here are two plays I bet we will see from Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham and the offense coordinator, Bo Baldwin. I think you will see a fly sweep throwback to either Cameron Scadaboo or maybe from Cameron Scadaboo to Trenton Bourguet. So he'll sweep to one side of the field or throw a tunnel screen to that side of the field that's actually a lateral and then throw it back across the field. I think we will see that one. And I think you'll see a double pass. One of those swing pass laterals and then chuck it down the field to Elijah Badger. I think the Ducks have to be on call for those two plays. I think you will see at least one, if not both of them. If I can hit 2 of 3 in my predictions there with Oregon scoring a defensive touchdown, the fly sweep throwback screen, and the double pass, I will feel like Connor Stallions out here. So let's go. Let's go.
Expect tricker seat for sure.
100%. So let's go to our predictions now. Guests go first, though this is a crossover episode. I've been hosting, quote unquote. Richie, your prediction for the game in Tempe on Saturday afternoon.
Score prediction?
Score prediction, yes.
Look, I want to believe in my heart of hearts that this could be another Washington game. And the edge here is you're at home, right? You're in Tempe. It's a Saturday afternoon game. It's hopefully an atmosphere where you can get fans to the stadium. And we haven't heard if it's going to be a sold-out game yet. That makes me worry there's going to be a lot of green in the crowd. But you're hoping that you can try to capture lightning in a bottle again, where you just harass Bo Nix and you get him to make very uncharacteristic turnovers. That's what you're hoping to do in this game, because the defense does that. It'd be almost impossible for the offense to not do something with 3 or 4 extra drives, or you get the 3 and outs, or you stall them out on 4th down. You find a way to create those opportunities. But the problem is I'm not saying you got lucky. What I'm saying is everything came together in that Washington game. You're asking a lot out of your team to be able to do that once. You need them to do it twice. I don't see that happening. As much as I want to take ASU in this game, they're going to really struggle to move the ball offensively, and that's going to lead to the defense being left out on the field, which, unfair to the defense, is going to lead to a big score. I have Oregon in this one, 44-17.
Your score prediction is very close to mine. I've got the Ducks scoring 45. I think they allow 13 to the Sun Devils, and I think there are just too many advantages for the Ducks on both sides of the ball. I think ASU's defense is good. I don't know if it's good enough to keep up with Oregon. I don't think they've got the top-to-bottom talent just yet. You give them 2 or 3 years, I think they could give Oregon much more of a game. I don't think they can do that here. I think Oregon's very mission-oriented, very standard-oriented on a week-to-week basis. They've had a tendency under Dan Lanning the last couple of years, thankfully, to not play down to the level of their competition when they're going up against an inferior opponent. So I think Oregon wins. I think they cover that 23.5 number, which is a lot of points on the road. And if ASU does keep it close, or closer than Oregon fans would like, it'll be because of the Sun Devils defense making life difficult for that Ducks offense. But Richie's got 44-17. I have 45-13. That is Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils. I be Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Ducks. Richie, a pleasure as always, my friend.
It's my pleasure as well, Spencer. Love talking football with you. For what it's worth to the Oregon fans out there, I really like your team, but I know that at the end of the day, I bleed maroon and gold. I'm rooting in my heart of hearts for ASU in this game. Like I said, it wasn't over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. It's not over now. I say, let's go.
Well, we are going to get to it for sure. Richie is your guide for everything Locked On Sun Devils. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. To my Duck fans, have a wonderful rest of your day and go Ducks. And to all the ASU fans, also go Ducks.